All right, let's do this. Okay, welcome to the Noemi and Co podcast. This is a Diaspora Playbook. Okay, so guys, I love creating content. Just a friendly reminder for me to keep doing what I'm doing. It would be nice if you followed, which means subscribe. It would be nice if you shared. Don't gatekeep. If you know anyone that you think could benefit from this content, it would be great. And I also just think we need more people like me from the African diaspora speaking up, making things happen on the ground, and being an example for others. So today I want to talk about something that I'm very passionate about is the Chinese playbook. All right, it's no secret China is all over Africa. I remember years ago the first time I think I transited through Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I was amazed by the amount of Chinese people that I saw get out of like the airport. It was insane. I was like, wait, are we in like Beijing? I was so confused. So with this topic, I really think as members of the African diaspora, especially the African countries that have the largest population, we're talking Ethiopia, Nigeria, DRC, Congo, native country, we I think have to get out of this like Western high-end luxury business mindset only and really adopt the Chinese model and learn from it. So what do I mean by that? Let's just get straight into it actually. I think there's three biggest challenges I think the diaspora we face in Africa when building businesses, especially in massive economies and countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, or Congo. I feel like where we really go wrong, first of all, we love to build complicated businesses. What do I mean by that? You guys, the amount of people that I get calling me, this is like family, friends, even family members, people that DM me, Noemi, I want to do this business, this idea. I never forget, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine sent me this business idea that he saw in another economy that he wants to do in Congo. You guys, the idea was so complicated. I was confused. I was like, wait, is this the idea? Wait, how does this work? Wait, what are you trying to do? Like, I was like, what the hell? Like, I think I'm educated. Like, I have 2 degree, which I think are very useless, but I think I'm smart. I think I'm quite intelligent, and I'm confused. So I was like, what in the world? So I had to like break it down, and I was like, can you tell me out of the 4 ideas that I just broke down, which one applies to the one that you're trying to do? He's like, oh, it's more like idea number one and two combined. I was like, how about you just focus on idea number one and then see how that works? And number two, the idea was some like complicated fintech, so finance technology idea. I'm like, Congo, over 90% of the population is on cash. Like, what? Yes, in an ideal world, Congo will go all technology, everybody will be on tech. But until we have governance and policies that incentivize people to go digital versus staying on cash, that ain't gonna change. So you either accept it, know how to work with it, or please don't waste your time. And I think this is a huge thing, even when it comes to services or products. Like, I've noticed with a lot of African countries, like we members of the diaspora or Africans in country, we go for the most complicated ideas where the simplest products, business is right in front of you, but you overlook it because it's not exciting, it's not sexy, it's not fun. But let's look at China. You guys, what is China known for? Manufacturing for cheap labor and cheap costs. Now with technology, they are going like speed ahead when it comes to production. I need to visit China because the stuff that I'm hearing about China in terms of innovation sounds like the Matrix. Sounds like these people are like 50 years ahead of the rest of the world because they are able to manufacture things so quickly, so cheaply, so fast, and still make so much money. Look at the brand Shein, fast fashion. These guys, I kid you not, I have the theory the person in the African continent, especially countries like Congo, Nigeria, Ethiopia, or even Kenya, that's gonna get a license with Shein and open a Shein store is gonna make bajillion dollars. Because if you live in the African continent, you will notice we have a lot of malls opening, but the stores we get here suck. Like Zara, H&M, where are you at? Other than South Africa. And I heard that the reason why they don't want to do it, importing fees are too high, so it's not even worth it to them by the time they sell it. But I kid you not, we have some beautiful Chinatown here in Nairobi that are gorgeous, like China Square. Do that with Shein, you're gonna make millions of dollars. And I think this is the China playbook. Here's the bottom line, by the way, as diaspora. we're not going to compete with China when it comes to price. You cannot. Like, I'm exporting honey to the US, hibiscus, baobab, moringa. Let me tell you, China makes up 70 to 80% of honey import into the US market. The average selling price of honey that they sell in the US is like 90 cents the pound. Me, I sell it for anywhere from $2 to $3 the pound because mine is specialty foods. Mine is organic forest honey, so it's more boutique. I'm not gonna compete with China. There's just no way in hell, and I'm not even gonna bother. So I think for many members of Diaspora doing business in Africa, like don't try to compete with pricing with China, but do try to work with them in terms of how they manage to do production at scale. And I think this is a big one to learn from China. Number two, simplify the product that you're trying to sell in Africa. You guys, please make it simple. Start with one problem, one product, supply to the mass, and then go from there. And I think number three, something that as Africans we don't talk about enough, is supply chain. This is a huge barrier for the African continent that you need to take into account. I was actually reading this article recently. There's a startup in Nigeria that just shut down, forgot the name, but I did like a deep dive. This is one thing about Africans. We always stare each other down. The Nigerians went off roasting these founders. But I did my research. It turns out this startup owned like seven businesses within the one company, and they just lost track of how to manage it all. And the reason why they had to do that, this is something we don't talk about enough. Owning a business in the African continent, because there's such a lack of infrastructure, you're having to own every single step of the production process. Whereas in developed countries like the US, for example, a good example with the US, most honey companies, this is the industry that I'm in, is specialty foods. I was on a call with a potential buyer of honey. I realized this buyer just owns the brand. They don't own the honey, they get their honey from Brazil. They don't package their own honey bottles. They supply that to like a processing plant in the US that's all the certification. So that tells me that literally their margins is just made up in the branding because they have deals with restaurants, hotels, and all that jazz. I'm like, what in the world? Whereas in Africa, here I am with Lubembo. I own a honey plant in Congo. I own a logistics company that takes the production of my honey from my farm to brings it to my Matadi port. I own like licensing for exporting. And then in the US, at one point, I wanted to buy a distribution center, like a 3PL. Whereas in the US, that's not a thing. Literally, a distribution center, 3PL, it's its own business. Honey production, imported, blah, blah, like everything is like a separate business. Whereas in Africa, because there's such a lack of infrastructure, we feel the need to own the entire supply chain, and you just can't. You will burn out, you will burn through cash, you'll go broke. So, my advice really is, and this goes now to the solution. I think number one, at the beginning, partner with Chinese and Turkish manufacturers. So, yeah, Turkey is now in the scene. Who would have thought? I'm confused. I was like, Turkey? Yep, Turkey's now in the scene. One of the biggest importers in Africa is now Turkey. I think for a start, you partner with those guys. Now, I don't advise you to spend the little money that you have to fly to China, meet bunch of distributors, blah blah blah. At the start, I really think just rely on websites like Taibo and like Alibaba. I know they charge up a little bit more, but if you do the cost analysis of you paying for a flight, hotel to China, and all that jazz, at the start it may be a bit painful. Get on calls with suppliers in China on WhatsApp or whatever you need to do. Literally identify what are products that Africans consume day to day at scale that I can get imported from China or from Turkey. And again, you're dealing with importation, custom, and all that jazz. So make sure you figure that out. But get them to produce those products for you at scale and import it and sell it. Once you make the money for that, I think the next step you decide whether do I just have an exclusive partnership with those producers in China or Turkey, get them to sell me the product at a lower price and then make them my exclusive partner, or you then invest in building a production that does those things. So once you get into production, you're getting into industrialization and manufacturing. Your thing is just to produce. And when you're a producer, your job is now to supply to other businesses. I personally think when you own a manufacturing and a production, to move away from selling directly to consumer, you really want to sell to other businesses. And in the African continent, you want to deal with like informal boutiques, You want to do, in the case of Congo, if you're in the production business of agriculture, you want to sell to like beer companies that need the raw material, like any company that's using like raw material like rice, cassava. You're a producer and manufacturing plant. You sell to those businesses because you're able to secure contracts and build at scale. So I think that if you want to get into that ball game, which I really advise, the machine you're still gonna have to import from China, but at least now you own the production. And I think even within production, you have two choices. You either become a processing plant or you actually produce some of the raw material on the soil, or you do both. So I personally would say pick one or the other and choose which one is the most lucrative. I think the processing plant is going to be more lucrative because you let the other farmers, the other local producers produce, but your plant is the only one that has the machinery to process what they're producing and turn it into consumable goods. I think this goes with what I call low cost manufacturing. And I think manufacturing today, what people don't talk about enough, like manufacturing today is actually getting cheaper and cheaper. Like you look at countries like India, they're able to produce these cheap ass small machines that are able to make you plastic bottles. Mool. Like it's so small, you can literally do it in your backyard. So I think investing in low cost manufacturing machinery that you can use to produce products that are so needed and consumed at scale is so key. Again, a good example, water bottles, right? Like it's so insane. We take this for granted, but like literally in economies like Ethiopia, Congo, and Nigeria, production of water bottles is actually quite costly and it's dominated by the Chinese. They literally just have these machines that produce mool and then blow up the balloons and they sell that to water companies. Even in Kenya, the water business is now everywhere. And literally, who is the biggest producer of the plastic bottle companies are the Chinese. So investing in machinery that are like low cost manufacturing and selling it to other businesses, I think is a great play in these massive African markets. And I think a last one that goes with that is packaging and low cost of manufacturing packaging. So a good example is myself actually. So I specialize in exporting specialty foods. I'm starting with the US market, but right now we're trying to introduce hibiscus, baobab, and moringa. So I'm doing an analysis. I'm like, okay, do I export the raw good, which is hibiscus, baobab, moringa, which baobab and moringa, you export them in powder form because that's how they're consumed. Do I export those in like big bags or do I import the final packaging from China, get people in Africa to package everything, and then by the time it gets to the US, it's ready to sell. Now, or do I import the raw material, just the powder goods, and then get it packaged in the US? The reality is, in an ideal world, you want to do everything in Africa, and just when you export to the US, it's the final product. And again, we're talking direct to consumer. When I'm supplying American businesses and buyers, I'm not going to handle the packaging, right? I just export in bulk. But even that, there's a specification of how you package things. But I'm talking about direct to consumer products. In an ideal world, the baobab powder, the moringa supplements, the honey, the hibiscus leaves will be all packaged in Africa because it sounds harsh to say it is cheaper labor than say the US, right? But the challenge becomes the packaging. You got to import it from China because most of the African countries don't have a manufacturing plant to make the supplement box, the supplement packaging for moringa, the bag, pouch bag for hibiscus. So you're importing from China, so you're paying for air freight material. Once it arrives here, they're packaging it, but what guarantees that by the time it gets to the US, the packaging meets USDA FDA standards? Question mark. So you then have to either invest in local facility that meet Western standards, or you just like, let me just export the raw material and then get it at a co-packager in the US that already has all the certification. So I think if you were to invest in a local assembly that's lower in cost, but has Western standard, and this only applies to people like me that are in the export game, you need to make sure that that facility has Western standard and bylaws so that by the time it gets here, it's already approved. But I think that's an opportunity. I really think that's a huge opportunity. And if you don't believe me, just look at the data. You guys, I'm in the export business. Every day when I look at the data, I am baffled. Like Africa, we have so much raw material that we don't consume. I'm in the honey business. African cultures, yes, we eat honey, but sub-Saharan Africa, for the most part, we prefer brown sugar that comes from sugar canes than honey. Hibiscus, there's a lot of hibiscus in Africa. Yes, we consume it, but let's be honest. Shout out to my Jamaican with B-sap juice, but we don't consume it as much as the West does in hibiscus tea. Baobab, incredible, love it. In Kinshasa, baobab runs out like that. But let's be honest, when you look at the purchase power of the US, baobab for like a 8-ounce bag is sold for over $10 because people use it as a diet supplement. Moringa is a huge supplement in like pills. We don't consume it as much here. So why not just supply it? But the reality is, if you're going to do that, you got to control the manufacturing. So I hope this helps, but I really advocate that Africa, we have an opportunity to imitate the Chinese model. We're not going to compete with China on price, but what we could imitate with China and now Turkey is the manufacturing, is the production of simple products. And don't try to be the first to produce. You're not going to be the first. If anything, never, you don't want to be the first. I suffered from the pioneer disease before. Now I make things that people already consume, and I'm just coming in trying to make things more efficient. But I really think what we have an opportunity, especially African countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Congo, that have such a massive population, I truly, truly believe producing simple products that consumers consume every day and need, reducing the assembly cost of packaging it and putting like selling it in country, producing it in country is a huge opportunity. And it makes sense if the Chinese are doing it in our own continent and succeeding, why aren't we? Think about it. Make sure to save this, subscribe, share, and thank you.